So I wanted to make this video about the consequences of dunking on fighting games, or rather the game that you are playing. And I want to start all this off by saying this one statement. You can't build a community that you are trying to destroy. Why do I say that? Well, as the fighting game community, as members of it, we all know that fighting games are incredibly small in terms of the esports scene. And so, if enough people dogpile on a game, then that toxicity, that negativity gets seen for not only the scene, but for the whole world to see. And if a person who is interested in a fighting game sees that and sees that enough people are commenting the same thing, then it's going to negatively influence them on whether or not they should be interested in a fighting game as a whole. Now, for instance, let's say that Street Fighter 6, somebody says that Street Fighter 6 is a dead game, right? And enough people say that, and say that, and say that, and say that, then an uninformed player who doesn't know any better, who doesn't know how to ask the right questions, will look at that and say, there's nobody playing Street Fighter 6. And so, because there's nobody playing Street Fighter 6, they rather play a game that has a more bigger population than that, even though what I just said is not true. But they don't know that. Only people who actually play the game, who know how to search and figure out the information, knows how to gather that kind of thing. And in my own personal experience, I have, battled this a little bit. Back in the day, I had made a video, trying to convince people to play BlazBlue Central Fiction. And I couldn't find that comment, but it went something along the lines of, the top tiers in BlazBlue are too strong for the other characters to compete against. Now, as someone who plays a lot of fighting games, this sentence applies to a lot. And I do mean a lot of different fighting games. This is not a BlazBlue only thing. However, something that I and many other BlazBlue players know about the game is that it is so balanced to the point where even the low tiers, if you play them correctly, if you're good enough with them, then you can beat any of the high tiers in the game. And this was proven at EVO 2024, where a Celica player went on to win the entire event. Now, if you don't know, Celica is not a highly rated character. She's one of the lowest in the games. And the Celica player was playing against Susanoo, was playing against S. There was a 9 and a Naoto in the bracket. There might have been another player. I don't really recall at this point in time. But if you know anything about BlazBlue, those characters are the who's who of the top tier. Every character that wasn't Celica is A tier or above. And the Celica player won. And it was pretty handy. Actually, I'm not going to say that because I don't remember the matches. But it was the Celica player won. Now, from my perspective, reading that comment told me that this person does not play BlazBlue. They heard somebody else who had a bad experience in BlazBlue, and, they said that opinion about the game. Now, of course, I could be wrong. That person could have played BlazBlue and had a really bad experience and said that thing, but nevertheless, it is something that it needed to be addressed right away so that no other new player getting into the game would see that and then get discouraged from trying the game out. And really, that's at the heart of this whole thing. Because when a fighting game player, no matter what subgenre rather, you get into, whether it be traditional, anime, versus, NetherRealm, whatever, at some point you will realize that, hey, fighting games kind of all use the same language. I can go from Street Fighter to Marvel to BlazBlue to Guilty Gear to this one to that one to this one to that one. And because of that, the scene does get new blood. It gets a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? It gets a lot more, blood in the system so that it can keep going. And who knows, maybe you even latch onto one of these other subgenres much more than what you came in with. And so losing one person from even getting into the scene is humongous. Now, in the case of Street Fighter V, I will say that if you are a person who enjoyed Street Fighter V for its gameplay and you much prefer that to Street Fighter 6, go ahead. I'm not going to take that away from you. Personally speaking, I'm not a person who enjoys Street Fighter 6's gameplay all that much. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it just didn't speak to me, and so I much rather play BlazBlue Central Fiction. And, the community is still there for the game. And, even to this day, people are still playing Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. People are still playing Guilty Gear Xrd, despite, other games they having other games in their own series that have more players than that. But to say that Street Fighter V is overall a better game than Street Fighter 6 is... I don't know what other word to call it, so I'll just say it's a lie. From an objective standpoint, it is a lie, because Street Fighter V has documented faulty rollback. And, well, personally, I don't know that much more about Street Fighter V. To compare that to Street Fighter 6, which honestly did most of what people wanted a fighting game to do on launch, which was have a story mode worth playing, showing frame data in training mode, having an online mode that genuinely works. The full package of Street Fighter 6 is a great game, but if it doesn't speak to you 100%, that's valid. But to say that game is bad in comparison to Street Fighter 5, that's a mind-boggling statement. And if a new player or anyone who is just interested in Street Fighter 6 knows of Street Fighter V and sees people dunking on Street Fighter 6, then that is a terrible look for Street Fighter 6 in general, because they'll see that and then they'll say, whoa, Street Fighter 6 is worse than 5? I ain't touching that game. And congratulations, the scene lost its new blood. So, in addition to that, because of how modern gaming is, it's not unheard of to hear of a game that is completely broken on release and needs a day one patch or patches down the line to fix. If someone reads that and they think to themselves, maybe a new patch came out and just smashed the game apart. You know what? I'm not going to play it. Maybe I'll play it some other time, buy it some other time rather, when there's a sale, and there's a good chance that they could just forget about Street Fighter 6 in that moment, because we don't know where they will be somewhere down the line. And this is also super important because, what I just mentioned about games in general being broken on patches or on release, it is important to get a pulse when you're buying any kind of game that receives frequent updates, to get a pulse of where it is now. And if that is the prevailing opinion, that Street Fighter 6 is worse than Street Fighter 5, why would they buy Street Fighter 6? To add on to that, a point that I wanted to make is that we, as members of the fighting game community, don't get to choose what games that new players will be interested in, no matter how much we would want one of our favorite games to be what they take an interest in. Maybe they have an interest in, because I'm talking about Street Fighter 6 because they like the design of Luke. Maybe they have an interest in Marvel vs. Capcom because Spider-Man is in it. And if the game that they choose that looks interesting to them is dogged on so much, why on planet Earth would they even bother to get, or rather show interest in that game in general? Now, Dragon Ball FighterZ is a bit of a different beast. How do you say, because of patch nature or patch culture, for lack of a better term, there are specific versions of games that we just don't have access to anymore. So in the case of the 3.5 mod, I do think that is a good thing. If a person really wants to play 3.5 version of Dragon Ball FighterZ, again, more power to them. But to hamper a game, to call it a party game, and things of that nature, is only just going to end up hurting the scene in general. And from this video, I just want people to, well, there's really two takeaways. So the first, play whatever game you want. There's so many fighting games out there. So many of them have rollback So there's, really no excuse. I mean, sure, scenes might not be as big as they could be, but there's no reason why person X or person Y can't make that scene any bigger by genuinely trying to make it grow. Again, people are playing Third Strike right now. If that doesn't open your eyes to see how old Third Strike is of a video game, I don't know what will. But so that's the first thing. The second way, and this is a bit complicated because different situations call for different things. Not everyone is going to be perfect in every situation. If it's real time in the moment, a live stream, for instance, people have a much harder time controlling themselves, and I can't really fault anyone for getting angry if they, lost a really intense match. Money is on the line. This one, that one, I get it, right? But for members of the community, I just want to encourage that people try to concoct their criticism in a way that is understandable and is not a blanket statement. Maybe you just say that you don't like Street Fighter 6 because neutral. There's a lot of neutral. Are there a lot of neutral skips in Street Fighter 6? I'm not going to say that. But, you don't like crouching medium kick, drive rush. You don't like the parry system. You don't like, what is it called again? I don't know, chain throws or something. I get it, right? There's a lot about the game that you cannot like, and voicing those things, I feel, would be 100%, valid. And things of that nature, to go over them in a way that is more constructive rather than just blind hate. And something, I almost forgot this part, but I really wanted to get to this, was that the reason I say the members of the community to make their statements more constructive is because as a community, we have a lot more power than we think we do. You, person sitting watching the other side, might not have a big community following behind you, but if enough members of the community say the same thing, then they can also decide whether a game lives or dies. Example being Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. That game, when it released, had the who's who of influencers defending that game, saying the gameplay is good, give it a shot, and that game died within a year. Because that's where the community decided. They didn't like the game. They didn't like the rushed look of it. They didn't like the fact that there were no X-Men and things of that nature. So the game flopped, and that was that. I almost forgot to mention this, but earlier today I was watching a video by Yako Kaman, The Curse of Video Game Criticism, where literally what I was just mentioning about a person who is uninformed taking the opinion of another happens, and it's around 9 minutes and 38 seconds where Yako mentions a review he made for Mario Odyssey some odd years ago, and the person in the comment section says that Joseph Anderson said all of these things, and that person took Joseph Anderson's word as the gospel. I don't know if this person ever played Mario Odyssey. I don't know if they were just looking for a review of the game, and just so happened that their favorite YouTube analytical critic guy just happened to do it, and they maybe they matched up 99% of the times with Joseph Anderson, and they decided that, why not? I'll just take his opinion of the game too. This is a situation that happens. It happens way more often than you would think when it comes to video games, because, again, I don't know if I said this in the video already, but we have a finite time. We're all aware of that, and so we want to make sure we're getting the most bang for buck in the price that we pay, so that we feel that we're getting the most, the most out of the games that we play. It's not a uncommon, nor is it an unreasonable expectation to go to reviewers, to go to communities, to go to a bunch of different sources to figure out if a game is worth playing. So, once again, just be mindful about how you comment on a game, because you don't know who's hearing. Someone out there is hearing you, and they may have had some kind of interest in the game that got shredded to bits when enough people said the same thing or parroted the same concept. But with all that being said, that's more or less what I wanted to say. Just that, as members of this community, all of us have a lot more power than we think we do. And with that, it is important that we all talk about these games in ways that don't scare new players from coming in. Honestly, I wish I had the perfect answer for that situation, but what I did now is the best that I could do for the moment. So, with that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Until then.